The morning sun was barely peeking through the dusty windows of Rosie's diner when Maya Chen tied her apron strings for what felt like the 100th time that week. The small roadside restaurant sat right on old Route 66, where the asphalt stretched endlessly in both directions like a black ribbon connecting nowhere to somewhere else. Maya had been working double shifts for 3 years straight, and every morning started the same way: coffee brewing, griddle heating, and the familiar ache in her feet before she'd even served her first customer. At 28, Maya never imagined she'd still be slinging hash and refilling coffee cups, but life had a funny way of changing your plans. When her daughter Lily turned 8 last month, Maya realized just how fast time was slipping by. Every penny she earned at the diner went toward rent, groceries, and school supplies. There wasn't much left over for dreams or vacation days. The diner itself had seen better decades. Red vinyl booths with duct tape patches, a jukebox that only played 3 songs, and a ceiling fan that wobbled like it might fall at any moment. But it had character, the kind that attracted truckers driving cross-country, families on road trips, and locals who'd been coming for their morning coffee since Maya was in diapers. Chuck Brennan owned the place, and he ran it like every dollar was his last. He was the kind of boss who counted napkins and timed bathroom breaks. Chuck cared about exactly 2 things: keeping his overhead low and his profits high. If that meant working his staff to the bone or cutting corners wherever possible, so be it. Maya had learned long ago not to expect sympathy or understanding from Chuck. He wasn't mean exactly, just completely focused on the bottom line. The morning rush was typical: construction workers grabbing coffee to go, a family with 3 kids sharing pancakes, and old Mrs. Patterson nursing her tea while reading the newspaper cover to cover. Maya moved between tables with practiced ease, remembering who wanted cream, who needed extra napkins, and who'd complain if their eggs weren't cooked exactly right. Around 1 in the afternoon, when the lunch crowd had mostly cleared out, the rumble of a motorcycle engine caught Maya's attention. She glanced through the window and watched as an older man climbed off a beautiful vintage Harley Davidson. The bike was pristine, chrome gleaming in the sunlight, leather seat worn but well-maintained. But it was the rider who really caught her eye. He moved slowly, not from laziness, but from the careful deliberation that comes with age and wisdom. His gray hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and his leather jacket looked like it had traveled thousands of miles. When he pushed through the front door, Maya noticed the small pins on his vest, military insignia that told stories without words. "Afternoon," he said with a smile that reached his eyes. His voice was gravelly but kind, like an old blues singer who'd seen everything life could throw at him. "Welcome to Rosie's," Maya replied, grabbing a menu. "Booth or counter?" "Booth's fine, if you don't mind. Been riding since dawn, and these old bones could use some real sitting." Maya led him to a corner booth where the afternoon light was gentle, and the view of his motorcycle was clear. As she set down the menu, she noticed his hands, weathered and scarred with a tattoo that looked like it dated back to the Vietnam era. But they were steady hands, the kind that had built things and fixed things and probably held together more than their fair share of broken situations. "What brings you through our little town?" Maya asked, genuinely curious. Most travelers just stopped for gas and kept driving. "Oh, just wandering, really. I'm Ray Miller, but most folks call me Gramps," he chuckled. "Been riding Route 66 for more years than I care to count. There's something about the old road that keeps calling me back. I'm Maya, and I can understand that. Sometimes I look out at that highway and wonder where it might take me if I just started walking." Gramps studied her face for a moment, the way older people do when they recognize something familiar in a stranger. "You got the look of someone with places to go and dreams to chase." Maya felt her cheeks warm. "Right now I'm just focused on getting through today. But maybe someday?" "Some day's got a way of sneaking up on you when you least expect it," Gramps said. "I'll take a coffee and whatever your best comfort food happens to be today. Meatloaf special's pretty good. Comes with mashed potatoes and green beans. Perfect. Been craving real food instead of truck stop sandwiches." As Maya walked away to place the order, she found herself smiling for the first time in days. There was something about Gramps that felt like talking to a favorite uncle or grandfather. He had that rare quality of making people feel heard and valued, even in a simple conversation about food. Chuck poked his head out of the back office, his beady eyes scanning the half-empty diner. "Maya, table 4 needs their check and don't forget to push the pie." We need to move it before it goes bad. Maya nodded and continued her routine, but she kept glancing back at Gramps. He sat quietly, looking out the window at his motorcycle with the contentment of someone who'd learned to find peace in simple moments. When she brought his coffee, he thanked her like she'd given him a gift instead of just doing her job. "You know," he said, stirring his coffee slowly, "I've been in a lot of diners over the years. You can tell a lot about a place by how the staff treats strangers." "Oh yeah? What's your verdict on us?" "Well, the coffee's good. The atmosphere's got character and the waitress has a kind heart. That's about all you need for a perfect stop." Maya felt that warm feeling again. It had been so long since anyone had noticed her kindness, let alone mentioned it out loud. Most days she felt invisible, just part of the diner's furniture. But somehow this old biker made her feel seen. When his food arrived, Gramps ate slowly and appreciatively, the way people do when they've learned not to rush through life's small pleasures. He asked Maya about the town, about the history of the diner, and seemed genuinely interested in her answers. It was refreshing to talk to someone who listened instead of just waiting for their turn to speak. The afternoon was shaping up to be quiet and peaceful, exactly the kind of day Maya preferred. Little did she know that in less than an hour, everything would change. Sometimes life's biggest moments arrive disguised as ordinary afternoons, and the choices we make when we think nobody's watching end up defining who we really are. The peaceful afternoon atmosphere at Rosie's diner was about to take a sharp turn. Maya was refilling Gramps' coffee cup when the front door burst open with unnecessary force, rattling the little bell that announced new customers. 5 teenage boys poured in like they owned the place, their voices loud and obnoxious, clearly trying to draw attention to themselves. They looked to be around 16 or 17, that awkward age where boys think being loud equals being tough. The kid leading the pack was tall with perfectly styled hair and expensive sneakers that probably cost more than Maya made in a week. His name was Tyler Richmond, though Maya didn't know it yet. What she did know was trouble when she saw it, and these kids had trouble written all over them. "This place is so old and gross," one of them announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Look at this ancient jukebox. Does it even work? Probably plays music from like the 1800s, another one laughed, shoving his friend toward the machine. Maya watched them with growing unease. She'd seen plenty of rowdy teenagers over the years, but something about this group felt different, meaner. They weren't just being silly kids, there was a nastiness in their energy that made her stomach tighten. The boys claimed a large booth in the center of the diner, completely ignoring Maya when she approached with menus. Instead, they were scanning the room like predators looking for something to target. Their eyes landed on Gramps, sitting quietly in his corner booth, and Maya saw the shift in their expressions immediately. "Oh man, check out Grandpa over there," Tyler said, not bothering to lower his voice. "Dude thinks he's still cool with that leather jacket. Probably rode here on a tricycle," another kid snickered. Maya felt her jaw clench, but she tried to stay professional. "Can I get you boys started with some drinks?" They barely glanced at her. "Just Cokes." Tyler dismissed her with a wave of his hand, his attention still fixed on Gramps. As Maya walked away to get their drinks, she noticed Gramps had heard every word. His face remained calm, but she could see the slight tension in his shoulders. He'd probably dealt with bullies before, likely when he was their age and definitely during whatever military service those pins on his vest represented, but that didn't make it right. The construction worker at table 6 was finishing his pie, clearly uncomfortable with the boy's behavior but not wanting to get involved. Mrs. Patterson had folded her newspaper and was staring at her teacup, pretending not to hear the increasingly cruel comments coming from the center booth. "I bet that bike outside doesn't even run," one of the boys said, pressing his face against the window. "Looks like something from a museum." "More like a junkyard," Tyler added. "Someone should call adult services. That old man probably shouldn't be driving anything more dangerous than a shopping cart." Maya slammed the Coke glasses down a little harder than necessary, her patience wearing thin. "Here are your drinks. Have you decided what you'd like to eat?" "We're not really hungry," Tyler said with a smirk. "Just wanted to see what kind of freaks hang out in roadside dumps." That word hit Maya like a slap. She'd heard customers complain about the diner's outdated decor before, but calling it a dump and calling the people who came here freaks crossed a line she wasn't willing to ignore. "This is a family restaurant," she said firmly. If you're not here to eat, maybe you should find somewhere else to hang out. Tyler's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? We're paying customers. We bought drinks, didn't we? Before Maya could respond, the situation got worse. Much worse. One of the boys had gotten up and was slowly walking toward Gramps' booth, his friend snickering behind him. Hey there, old-timer, he called out. Shouldn't you be in a nursing home instead of playing biker? Gramps looked up from his nearly empty plate, his expression still calm but alert. Just enjoying a meal, son. No trouble here. Oh, we're not trouble, the kid said, sliding uninvited into the booth across from Gramps. We're just curious. Like, how old is too old to ride a motorcycle? 70, 80? When do they take your license away? Maya started walking over, but Tyler caught her arm. Let them talk. It's just conversation. The boy across from Gramps was getting bolder, encouraged by his friend's laughter. I mean, your reflexes must be shot by now. What happens when you need to brake fast? Do you just close your eyes and hope for the best? I've been riding longer than you've been alive, Gramps said quietly. Never had an accident yet. Yet being the key word, another boy chimed in, moving closer to the booth. Maybe we should call the DMV, report a public safety hazard. Maya pulled her arm free from Tyler's grip and took another step toward Gramps' booth. But she could see Chuck through the service window in the back. He was watching the whole thing unfold, but instead of coming out to help, he was backing further into the kitchen. She realized with a sick feeling that he wasn't going to intervene. These kids might be bullies, but they were also customers, and Chuck cared more about avoiding conflict than protecting his other guests. The harassment was escalating quickly. The boy sitting across from Gramps reached over and flicked the sugar packets on his table, scattering them across the surface. Oops, sorry. Old man reflexes, you know? Didn't see that coming either, did you? His friends burst into cruel laughter, and Maya saw something she'd never seen before. Gramps' hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear, she realized, but from the effort of staying calm when every instinct probably told him to defend himself. That's enough, Maya said, her voice carrying across the diner. But the boys were too caught up in their game to listen. The kid across from Gramps knocked over his coffee cup, sending the dark liquid spreading across the table and dripping onto the floor. Wow, what a mess. Good thing you're done eating anyway, right, Grandpa? Time to head home before someone gets hurt. The coffee was dripping onto Gramps' lap, staining his jeans, but he didn't move. He just sat there with dignity that made Maya's heart ache, refusing to give these bullies the reaction they wanted. Hey, Maya called out louder, but Tyler stepped in front of her again. Mind your own business, waitress. We're just having fun. Fun? Maya's voice rose. You call humiliating an elderly man fun? The other customers were watching now, their discomfort obvious, but no one was stepping forward to help. The construction worker had left money on his table and was heading for the door. Mrs. Patterson was gathering her purse, clearly planning her own escape. Maya realized with crystal clarity that if someone didn't act soon, this situation was going to get much worse. These boys were feeding off each other's cruelty, and Gramps, this kind, gentle man who'd made her smile just an hour ago, was trapped in their web of teenage malice. The moment of decision was coming, whether she was ready for it or not. Maya's hands were trembling with anger as she watched the coffee continue to drip from Gramps' table onto the floor. The boy who'd spilled it was grinning like he'd just won some kind of prize, while his friends egged him on with their laughter. But it was the look in Gramps' eyes that finally pushed Maya past her breaking point. Not fear, but a deep sadness that came from being treated like less than human. That's it, Maya said, her voice cutting through the noise like a knife. She pushed past Tyler's outstretched arm and marched straight to Gramps' booth. You need to move, now! The boy sitting across from Gramps looked up at her with mock innocence. We're just talking, lady. This is America, right? Free speech and all that. Free speech doesn't include harassment and destruction of property, Maya shot back, grabbing a handful of napkins from the dispenser. She started wiping up the spilled coffee while addressing Gramps directly. I'm so sorry about this. Let me get you a fresh cup and clean this up properly. You don't need to apologize for them, Gramps said quietly, but Maya could hear the gratitude in his voice. Tyler appeared beside the booth, his face flushed with anger. Excuse me, but we were here first. You can't just kick us out because we're having a conversation. Maya straightened up and looked Tyler dead in the eye. A conversation? Is that what you call spilling coffee on an elderly man and making fun of his age? Because where I come from, we call that bullying. He's taking up space, and another boy chimed in. Sitting here for hours nursing one cup of coffee. This is a business, not a retirement home. The unfairness of that comment made Maya's blood boil. She'd watched Gramps eat a full meal, tip generously on everything he ordered, and treat her with more kindness than most customers showed in a month. These kids had bought nothing but sodas and had spent their time making everyone else uncomfortable. He's been nothing but polite and respectful, Maya said, her voice getting stronger. Which is more than I can say for you five. Oh, so now you're taking sides? Tyler stepped closer, trying to intimidate her with his height. We're customers too, you know. The customer is always right, isn't that what they say? Not when the customer is being cruel to other people, Maya replied without backing down. And definitely not when they're making a mess and disturbing everyone else in the restaurant. She turned back to Gramps, who was trying to dab coffee stains out of his jeans with the napkins she'd given him. Sir, why don't you come sit at the counter? I'll get you that fresh coffee and maybe a piece of apple pie on the house. But as Gramps started to slide out of the booth, one of the boys deliberately stepped into his path. Where do you think you're going, old man? We're not done talking yet. That's when Maya's patience completely ran out. 3 years of working double shifts, dealing with difficult customers, and watching Chuck prioritize profits over people had built up a reservoir of frustration that finally overflowed. But more than that, watching this kind, gentle man be humiliated by a bunch of spoiled teenagers awakened something fierce and protective in her chest. Move, she said to the boy blocking Gramps' path. Her voice was steady but carried a warning that made even his friends go quiet. Or what? He challenged, puffing out his chest. Or I'll move you myself, Maya said, stepping between him and Gramps. She was barely 5'4" and probably weighed less than any of these boys, but something in her tone made the kid take a half step back. You can't touch us, Tyler said, pulling out his phone. I'll call the cops and have you arrested for assault. Go ahead, Maya said, her fear replaced by righteous anger. Call them. I'd love to explain to the police how 5 teenagers ganged up to humiliate a 70-year-old veteran in my restaurant. The word veteran seemed to hit home. A couple of the boys exchanged glances, suddenly looking less confident. But Tyler's face just got redder. You don't know who you're messing with, he said, his voice getting louder. My dad owns half this town. One phone call from me and you'll be out of a job so fast your head will spin. Maya felt a chill run down her spine, but she kept her expression steady. She'd heard whispers about the Richmond family. Old money, political connections, the kind of people who expected special treatment wherever they went. But looking at Gramps, still sitting patiently while coffee stains spread across his vintage jeans, she realized she didn't care about the consequences anymore. Then I guess you better make that call, she said, because I'm not going to stand here and watch you torture someone who's done nothing wrong. The diner had gone completely silent. Even the jukebox seemed to have stopped playing. Mrs. Patterson was frozen halfway out of her booth, her purse clutched to her chest. Through the service window, Maya could see Chuck's face, pale and panicked, clearly hearing every word but still not coming out to help. Tyler's fingers were already flying over his phone screen. Fine, don't say I didn't warn you. While he made his call, Maya helped Gramps to his feet and guided him to a stool at the counter, away from the group of boys. Her hands were shaking now, not from anger, but from the realization of what she'd just done. In a town this small, crossing the Richmond family was like signing your own termination letter. You didn't have to do that, Gramps said softly once he was seated. I've dealt with worse. No one should have to deal with that, Maya replied, pouring him fresh coffee. And especially not someone who served his country. Gramps glanced down at the military pins on his vest and gave her a small smile. How did you know? My grandfather was Army, I recognize the look. Maya set the coffee in front of him. Plus you have that bearing. The way you carry yourself. My grandfather always said you can tell a veteran by how they sit and how they listen. Smart man. Your grandfather. Behind them, Tyler was finishing his phone call, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Yeah, Dad, the waitress was totally out of line. Completely unprofessional. We're never coming back here again, and neither are any of our friends. Maya closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She knew what was coming next. Sure enough, Chuck's office door opened and he emerged looking like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. His face was gray and his hands were shaking as he approached the counter where Maya stood next to Gramps. Maya, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I need to see you in the back now. The walk to Chuck's office felt like a funeral march. Maya could feel every eye in the diner watching her, and she heard Tyler's satisfied chuckle as she passed his table. Chuck closed the door behind them and slumped into his desk chair like the weight of the world had just landed on his shoulders. "You know I have to let you go," he said without looking at her. "I know," Maya replied, surprised by how calm she sounded. "The Richmonds, they're threatening to pull their catering contracts. That's $3,000 a month, Maya, and they're talking about organizing a boycott." Chuck's voice cracked. "I can't afford to lose that kind of money." Maya nodded, untying her apron with steady hands. 3 years of her life, all the double shifts and aching feet and difficult customers, ending because she'd stood up for basic human decency. "I understand," she said, though she really didn't. "When do you need me gone?" "Now," Chuck said miserably. "I'm sorry, Maya, I really am. You're a good worker, and what you did was the right thing. But I can't risk my business." Maya folded her apron carefully and set it on his desk. "I hope it was worth it," she said quietly, and walked out of his office for the last time. When she emerged, the teenage boys were gone, their booth empty except for scattered napkins and the sticky rings left by their soda glasses. But Gramps was still sitting at the counter, and when he saw her face, his expression crumpled with understanding. "They fired you," he said. "It wasn't a question." "They did." Maya managed a shaky smile. "But I'd do it again." Gramps reached into his wallet and pulled out a $100 bill, pressing it into her hand despite her protests. "This isn't charity," he said firmly. "This is respect, for doing what everyone else in this room should have done." As Maya walked toward the door, she felt lighter somehow, despite losing her job. She'd stood up for something that mattered, and no amount of money or threats could take that away from her. She had no idea that the old biker she'd defended was about to make some phone calls that would change everything. As Maya walked out of Rosie's diner for the last time as an employee, she felt a strange mix of emotions swirling in her chest. Part of her was devastated. 3 years of steady work gone in an instant, bills piling up at home, and no idea how she'd explain this to 8-year-old Lily. But another part of her felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Pride. Real, genuine pride in doing what was right, even when it cost her everything. She sat in her old Honda Civic for a few minutes, watching through the diner's windows as life went on without her. Chuck was wiping down tables with nervous energy, probably already regretting his decision but too scared of the Richmond family to change his mind. A few new customers had wandered in, completely unaware of the drama that had just unfolded, but Maya's attention kept drifting to Gramps, who was still sitting at the counter. Even from the parking lot, she could see him talking on his phone, his free hand gesturing as he spoke. There was something different about his posture now, less of the relaxed tourist and more of a man with a mission. She wondered who he was calling, but figured it was probably his family, letting them know about the incident that had cost a stranger her job. Maya finally started her car and drove home to the small apartment she shared with Lily. As she climbed the stairs to their second-floor unit, the weight of reality began to settle in. Rent was due in 2 weeks. Lily needed new school shoes. The electric bill was already overdue. Maya had maybe enough savings to cover 1 month of expenses, and that was if she cut everything down to bare essentials. Inside the apartment, Maya found Lily at the kitchen table, working on math homework with the intense concentration that 8-year-olds brought to everything they cared about. Her dark hair was pulled back in pigtails that were already coming loose, and she had a pencil smudge on her cheek from erasing too enthusiastically. "Mama, you're home early," Lily said, looking up with bright eyes. "Did you bring me a cookie from the diner?" Maya's heart clenched. She'd been bringing Lily leftover cookies and muffins from work for 3 years, small treats that Chuck allowed her to take home instead of throwing away. It was one of the few perks of a job that didn't offer much, and now even that tiny tradition was over. "Not today, sweetheart," Maya said, sitting down next to her daughter. "Actually, Mama needs to tell you something important." Meanwhile, 15 miles away at a truck stop just off the interstate, Gramps had moved from his bike to a picnic table where he could spread out a worn leather address book, filled with phone numbers collected over decades of riding. His first call had been to Tommy Rodriguez, president of the Iron Eagles motorcycle club that Gramps had been a member of for over 20 years. "Tommy, it's Gramps," he'd said. "I need to tell you about something that happened today. Something that's got my blood boiling." Tommy had listened as Gramps recounted the entire incident. The teenage bullies, Maya's courageous stand, and the injustice of her firing. By the time Gramps finished, Tommy was already reaching for his own phone. "Those kids think they can push around a veteran and get away with it," Tommy had said, his voice tight with anger. "And they got that girl fired for doing the right thing? Hell no, Gramps. This stops now." "I was hoping you'd see it that way," Gramps had replied. "What do you think about organizing a little support gathering?" "Brother, by the time I'm done making calls, half the state's gonna know about this. You just sit tight and let us handle the rest." That conversation had been 2 hours ago. Since then, Gramps' phone hadn't stopped ringing as the story spread through networks he'd spent decades building. The Iron Eagles had contact lists that stretched across 3 states, connecting motorcycle clubs, veteran organizations, and riding groups of every kind. Each person Tommy called made 3 more calls of their own. Each of those people called their friends, their riding partners, their old military buddies. The story was spreading like wildfire, but it wasn't just spreading randomly. These were tight-knit communities built on respect, honor, and looking out for your own. When they heard about an elderly veteran being humiliated and a working mother losing her job for defending him, it struck at the very core of everything they believed in. Jimmy Patterson, a retired Marine from 2 counties over, was organizing his local American Legion Riders chapter. "Pack light and ride fast," he told his members. "We've got a rally to attend and we're not the only ones coming." Lisa Chen, who ran a women's motorcycle group called the Road Sisters, had already mapped out the fastest route to Maya's town. "This isn't about revenge," she explained to her members. "This is about showing up for someone who showed up for us. That girl defended one of our own when nobody else would." Down in the valley, 3 different veteran support groups were coordinating their arrival times. Up in the mountains, a club of retired police officers who rode on weekends had decided to join the convoy. Even the local chapter of Gold Star Mothers, women who'd lost sons and daughters in military service, were planning to make the drive. Social media was buzzing too. Photos of Maya helping Gramps had somehow surfaced, though no one was quite sure how. The image of a small woman standing up to 5 teenage bullies on behalf of an elderly veteran was exactly the kind of story that resonated with people tired of seeing good folks get walked on. But it wasn't just bikers and veterans responding. The story had touched something deeper in people who remembered when standing up for others actually meant something. Teachers, nurses, construction workers, shop owners, regular people who worked hard and played by the rules were sharing the story and expressing their outrage at Maya's treatment. Back at her apartment, Maya was trying to figure out how to stretch $27 in groceries across the next week when her phone started buzzing with notifications. Someone had tagged her in a Facebook post about the incident at the diner, then another post, then 5 more. "Mama, your phone's making a lot of noise," Lily observed, looking up from the coloring book she'd moved on to after finishing her homework. Maya checked her phone and felt her eyes widen. Somehow, the story of what had happened at Rosie's diner was spreading across social media. People were calling her a hero, praising her courage and expressing outrage at her firing. There were hundreds of comments, and the numbers were growing by the minute. "Local waitress stands up for elderly veteran and gets fired for it," read one headline that had been shared dozens of times. "This is what real courage looks like," said another post, accompanied by what looked like a grainy photo taken through the diner's window. Maya felt overwhelmed. She'd never wanted attention or recognition. She'd just done what felt right in the moment. But seeing all these supportive comments from strangers made her realize that maybe she wasn't as alone as she'd thought. Maybe there were still people in the world who valued doing the right thing even when it was hard. Her phone rang, startling both her and Lily. The number wasn't one she recognized. "Hello?" she answered cautiously. "Is this Maya Chen, the waitress from Rosie's diner?" The voice was female, older, with a slight southern accent. "Yes, but I don't work there anymore," Maya said automatically. "Honey, my name is Betty Mills and I'm calling from the Gold Star Mothers chapter down in Riverside. We heard about what you did today, standing up for one of our veterans. We just wanted you to know that you're not alone in this." Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. "That's very kind of you, but I really just did what anyone would have done." "No, sweetie," Betty said firmly. "You did what anyone should have done. There's a big difference, and tomorrow morning, you're going to see just how many people understand that difference." After Maya hung up, she sat staring at her phone, trying to process what was happening. Outside her apartment window, she could hear the distant rumble of motorcycle engines on the highway, more than usual for a Tuesday evening. She wondered if it was just coincidence or if something bigger was building. She had no idea that 50 miles away, convoys of motorcycles were already hitting the road, headlights cutting through the growing darkness as riders from across the region began converging on her small town. The gathering storm that Gramps had set in motion was rolling closer with every passing hour. Tomorrow was going to change everything. Maya woke up at 6 in the morning to a sound she'd never heard before in her quiet little town. It started as a low rumble like distant thunder that wouldn't go away. She lay in bed for a moment thinking maybe it was construction equipment or a freight train passing through. But as the sound grew louder and more persistent, she realized it was something else entirely. The rumble was getting closer, and it was coming from multiple directions at once. Maya slipped out of bed and padded to her living room window, careful not to wake Lily. What she saw made her heart stop. Motorcycles were streaming into town from every road that led to the main highway. Not just a few bikes, but dozens of them, then hundreds. The steady stream of headlights looked like a river of light flowing toward the center of town. Her phone started ringing, and she grabbed it quickly. Hello? Maya, honey, this is Betty Mills from yesterday. I hope you don't mind me calling so early, but I wanted you to look outside your window. I am looking, Maya whispered, still stunned by the sight. What's happening? That's what happens when good people hear about someone doing the right thing, Betty said, her voice warm with pride. Word spread through the veteran community, the motorcycle clubs, the riding groups. People drove all night to get here. They're not here to cause trouble. They're here to show support for you and that kind gentleman you defended. Maya watched as more bikes appeared, their riders wearing leather vests covered in patches and pins. She could see American flags, military insignia, and club colors from organizations she'd never heard of. But what struck her most was how orderly everything was. Despite the overwhelming number of motorcycles, the riders were following traffic laws, parking in neat rows, and moving with the discipline of people who understood respect and honor. I don't understand, Maya said, her voice shaky with emotion. I just did what felt right. Exactly, Betty replied. And in a world where too many people look the other way, that makes you special. These folks want you to know that you're not alone. By 7:30, the entire downtown area was transformed. Main Street looked like the world's largest motorcycle rally had suddenly materialized overnight. Maya counted at least 300 bikes, and more were still arriving. The riders themselves were as diverse as their motorcycles, men and women of all ages, from college students to retirees, united by their love of riding and their respect for doing what's right. Gramps stood at the center of it all, near the entrance to Rosie's diner, greeting old friends and new allies alike. Maya could see him through her window, looking more energized than he had the day before. This wasn't just an old man who'd been bullied. This was clearly someone who commanded genuine respect in communities she'd never known existed. The local news van arrived at 8 o'clock, followed by reporters from 2 neighboring cities. Maya watched from her window as journalists interviewed riders, capturing stories of brotherhood, service, and the simple belief that good people should stand up for each other. She overheard one rider, a woman with gray hair and a leather jacket covered in military patches, telling a reporter, "That young lady at the diner showed more courage than most people show in a lifetime. She deserves to know she's got an army behind her." Chuck arrived at the diner at 8:15 like he did every morning, but Maya could see his face go pale when he realized what was happening. He stood frozen in the middle of the parking lot, surrounded by hundreds of motorcycles and their riders, clearly understanding that this massive gathering was directly connected to his decision to fire Maya the day before. Maya got dressed quickly and walked downtown with Lily, who was bouncing with excitement at seeing so many motorcycles in their usually quiet town. As they approached the diner, the crowd of riders noticed them and began to part, creating a clear path. Maya felt like she was walking through an honor guard. "Are you Maya?" asked a tall man with kind eyes and a vest that read Iron Eagles MC President. When she nodded, he extended his hand. "I'm Tommy Rodriguez. We're here because of what you did yesterday. That took real guts, standing up for Gramps like that." "I just couldn't watch them treat him that way," Maya said, still overwhelmed by the scene around her. "That's exactly why we're here," Tommy replied. "Because you couldn't watch it happen and you did something about it." Gramps appeared beside them, his weathered face creased with the biggest smile Maya had ever seen. I told you yesterday that someday has a way of sneaking up on you, he said, gesturing to the incredible gathering around them. Well, looks like today's your someday. The crowd was growing larger by the minute, but Maya noticed it wasn't just bikers anymore. Local residents were coming out of their houses, drawn by the unusual activity. Shop owners were opening early to serve coffee to the visitors. Maya saw Mrs. Patterson from the diner talking animatedly with a group of female riders, gesticulating as she clearly recounted yesterday's events. Then Maya spotted Chuck through the diner's window, pacing back and forth behind the counter. His usual morning routine was completely disrupted, and she could see him making phone calls, his face growing more panicked with each conversation. I think your former boss is having second thoughts, Gramps observed, following her gaze. As if on cue, Chuck emerged from the diner and approached the group surrounding Maya. His face was red, and his hands were visibly shaking. "Maya!" he called out, his voice barely audible over the rumble of idling engines. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" The crowd went quiet, hundreds of eyes focusing on Chuck with expressions that ranged from curious to distinctly unfriendly. Tommy stepped slightly closer to Maya, not threatening but clearly protective. "Yesterday was a mistake," Chuck began, his words tumbling over each other. "I was wrong to fire you. Those kids were way out of line, and you were just doing your job, doing the right thing. The Richmond boy's father called me this morning. They're backing down from their threats. Apparently their family lawyer advised them that this much attention on their son's behavior isn't good for their reputation." Maya looked around at the sea of supportive faces surrounding her. These weren't just random strangers. They were people who understood what it meant to have each other's backs, to stand up for what's right even when it's difficult. "I want to offer you your job back," Chuck continued desperately, with a raise. "And I promise nothing like this will ever happen again. I'll make it clear that harassment of customers won't be tolerated no matter who's doing it." Before Maya could respond, a woman rider stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said politely but firmly. "My name is Linda Foster, and I own Foster's Family Restaurant about 20 miles down the highway. Maya, if you're looking for work, I'd love to talk to you. We believe in treating our employees with respect, and we sure could use someone with your courage and work ethic." "I'll second that offer," called out another voice from the crowd. "Jake's Roadhouse, next county over. We've been looking for someone to manage our day shift." "Peterson's Truck Stop," another person chimed in. "Full benefits and better pay than you're making here." Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes as job offer after job offer came from the crowd. These weren't pity offers, they were genuine. Opportunities from people who recognized her character and wanted her on their teams. Chuck's face fell as he realized he wasn't just competing with other local restaurants anymore. Word of Maya's courage had spread far beyond their small town, and business owners from across the region were eager to hire someone with her integrity. "Maya," Gramps said quietly, just for her to hear, "yesterday you showed everyone in that diner what real courage looks like. Today you're seeing what happens when that courage inspires others. Whatever you decide to do next, you've got an entire community behind you." Now Maya looked around at the incredible scene. Hundreds of people who'd traveled from far and wide, just to show their support. For a waitress who'd stood up for what was right, she thought about Lily watching wide-eyed from beside her, learning that sometimes doing the right thing doesn't just cost you. Sometimes it opens doors you never knew existed. "Chuck," she said finally, her voice steady and clear. "I appreciate the offer. I really do. But I think it's time for me to find a place where doing the right thing is valued from day one. Not just when there's a crowd watching." The cheer that went up from the assembled riders could probably be heard 3 towns over. As Maya hugged Gramps and accepted congratulations from her new extended family of supporters, she realized that losing her job at Rosie's Diner wasn't an ending at all. It was the beginning of something much bigger and better than she'd ever imagined possible.